The shuttle descended slowly toward the surface of the planet, its engines humming softly as it pierced through layers of thick, swirling clouds. Inside, Daniel Carter sat rigidly in his seat, gripping the armrests tightly. His uniform was freshly pressed, but beads of sweat formed along his hairline despite the cool air circulating throughout the cabin. This was supposed to be a routine mission, a diplomatic exchange between humanity and the Zarnok Empire. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Zarnok were not like other species humans had encountered before. Towering, at nearly 9 feet tall with skin resembling polished obsidian and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce into your very soul, they exuded an aura of authority that made most people uneasy. Even seasoned diplomats admitted privately that dealing with the Zarnok required nerves of steel. For Daniel, who had only recently graduated from the academy, this was his first real test outside of simulations and classroom lectures. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what awaited him on the ground below. As the shuttle touched down on the rocky terrain, Daniel glanced out the window. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, barren and desolate under 2 pale suns casting long shadows across jagged cliffs and deep ravines. It looked more like a painting of some alien nightmare than a place where life could exist. Yet here they were, preparing to meet one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "All right, team," said Laura Bennett, stepping forward once the hatch opened. She was tall and lean, her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. Her voice carried confidence, though there was a hint of tension beneath it. "Remember why we're here? We need to show respect and professionalism. One wrong move and this whole mission could fall apart." Daniel nodded along with the others, trying to steady his breathing. He adjusted the strap of his rifle slung over his shoulder and followed Laura out onto the dusty ground. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something sharp and unfamiliar. Around them, members of the Zarnok delegation stood waiting, their massive forms silhouetted against the horizon. At the center of the group loomed Kelvor, the general leading the Empire's forces. His presence alone commanded attention. Even standing still, he radiated power. Laura approached cautiously, bowing slightly according to protocol. Behind her, Daniel mimicked the gesture, though his movements felt awkward compared to hers. The Zarnok responded by raising their hands, in unison, palms facing outward, a traditional sign of greeting. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Daniel misjudged the timing. As the humans began moving into position for further introductions, he accidentally stepped forward too soon, breaking the carefully choreographed rhythm of the ceremony. For a moment, no one reacted. Then Kelvor turned his head sharply, his glowing eyes locking onto Daniel. The young cadet froze, suddenly aware of every sound around him, the crunch of gravel beneath boots, the faint whistle of wind slicing through the canyon, the collective intake of breath from his fellow crewmates. Kelvor's expression darkened, his lips curling into what might have been a snarl or perhaps just a grimace of displeasure. Whatever it was, it sent a chill down Daniel's spine. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Kelvor's voice boomed, deep and resonant, echoing across the open space. Though spoken in the Zarnok language, the translator device clipped to Daniel's collar rendered the words instantly comprehensible. Still, understanding didn't make them any less intimidating. Laura quickly stepped in, attempting to defuse the situation. "General Kelvor, please forgive us. This was unintentional. Cadet Carter meant no disrespect." But Kelvor wasn't listening. His gaze remained fixed on Daniel, who now wished desperately that he could disappear. "You dare disrupt our sacred ritual? Do you think so little of our customs?" It wasn't intentional, sir," Daniel stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He hated how weak he sounded, but fear gripped him like a vice. "I'm sorry." Kelvor tilted his head slightly, studying Daniel as if sizing him up. There was a moment of silence, heavy and oppressive, before the general spoke again. "An apology will not suffice. Such insolence must be answered with action. I challenge you to a duel." Gasps rippled through both groups. Laura spun around, her face pale. "General, surely this isn't necessary. It is my right, Kael'vor interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. If your kind wishes to prove itself worthy of alliance, then let this human stand and face me. Or does your species lack honor? Daniel felt his stomach drop. Dueling wasn't uncommon among the Zarnok. It was often used to settle disputes or demonstrate strength, but humans rarely participated in such practices. Most considered them outdated and barbaric. Yet refusing would mean admitting cowardice, which could ruin any chance of peaceful negotiations. I'll do it, Daniel blurted out before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air, shocking even him. Everyone turned to look at him, their expressions ranging from disbelief to concern. Laura shot him a warning glance, but it was too late. Kael'vor let out a low rumble that might have been laughter, or maybe approval. Very well, the general said, stepping back. We shall meet tomorrow at dawn. Prepare yourself, human. With that, the Zarnok delegation departed, leaving Daniel and his crewmates standing in stunned silence. Laura immediately grabbed Daniel by the arm and pulled him aside. What were you thinking? She hissed, keeping her voice low so the others wouldn't hear. You don't know what you've just gotten yourself into. I panicked, Daniel admitted, running a hand through his hair. He was accusing me of being dishonorable. I couldn't just stand there and say nothing. Laura sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. This isn't about honor, Daniel. It's about survival. Kael'vor is one of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. You're walking into a fight you can't possibly win. But backing down would make things worse, Daniel argued, though doubt gnawed at him. Wouldn't it? Laura hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Yes, but that doesn't mean we can't prepare you. Come on, we don't have much time. Back aboard the ship, Daniel found himself thrust into an intense training session. Laura worked tirelessly to teach him basic combat techniques, focusing on how to use the environment to his advantage. The duel would take place in the planet's low-gravity conditions, which meant traditional strategies wouldn't apply. Every movement required precision and control, and Daniel struggled to adapt. Meanwhile, rumors spread quickly among the crew. Some believed Daniel's decision was reckless, while others admired his courage. Emily Dawson, the ship's medic, visited him during a break, offering words of encouragement. You're stronger than you think, she told him, handing him a bottle of water. Just remember, it's not always about winning. Sometimes it's about showing character. Her words stayed with him as night fell, and sleep proved elusive. Lying awake in his quarters, Daniel stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but giving up wasn't an option. Tomorrow he would step onto that battlefield, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. For the sake of the mission, for the sake of humanity, he couldn't afford to fail. The morning arrived too quickly for Daniel. As the first rays of light from the twin suns crept over the jagged horizon, he stood at the edge of the canyon where the duel was set to take place. The air was cold and thin, making each breath feel sharp in his lungs. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the strap of his energy baton, a standard-issue weapon that suddenly seemed inadequate compared to the glowing plasma blade Kael'vor carried. Around him, the crew bustled about, setting up equipment and ensuring everything was ready. Laura moved among them, her expression calm but her eyes betraying concern. Remember what we practiced, she said, stepping close to Daniel. Her voice was steady, though quieter than usual. Stay on your feet, use the terrain, and don't let him intimidate you. Daniel nodded, though his throat felt dry. He wanted to believe her advice would be enough, but facing an opponent like Kael'vor felt impossible. The general wasn't just physically imposing, he radiated confidence, a stark contrast to Daniel's own unease. Still, there was no turning back now. The Zarnok delegation had already gathered on the other side of the canyon, their forms silhouetted against the rising suns. Kael'vor stood at the center, his blade resting casually at his side as if it weighed nothing. As the two groups approached the designated meeting point, tension crackled in the air. Diplomats from both sides exchanged formal greetings, their voices echoing across the rocky expanse. Daniel tried to focus on the moment, but his mind kept racing with worst-case scenarios. What if he made a mistake? What if his actions cost humanity a chance at peace? The weight of those thoughts pressed down on him, nearly suffocating. When it was time to begin, Kael'vor stepped forward, his movements deliberate and commanding. "Are you prepared, human?" he asked, his deep voice carrying easily despite the distance between them. "I am," Daniel replied, forcing himself to sound more confident than he felt. He tightened his grip on the baton, his knuckles white. Kael'vor raised his blade, the weapon humming softly as it came to life. "Then let us see if your species is worthy of respect." The duel began without further ceremony. Kael'vor moved with surprising speed for someone of his size, closing the gap between them in seconds. Daniel barely had time to react, raising his baton just in time to block the first strike. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through his arms, nearly knocking him off balance. He stumbled backward, his boots skidding across the loose gravel. "You're slow," Kael'vor growled, pressing the attack. Another swing came, this one aimed at Daniel's midsection. He twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the blade, but the movement left him exposed. A third strike grazed his shoulder, slicing through the fabric of his uniform and leaving a shallow cut beneath. Pain flared, but Daniel gritted his teeth and forced himself to stay focused. Laura's earlier lessons echoed in his mind. Use the environment. Spotting a cluster of boulders nearby, he darted toward them, using the rocks as cover. Kael'vor followed, his massive frame dwarfing the landscape as he closed in. Each step he took sent vibrations through the ground, a reminder of the power Daniel was up against. Daniel peeked out from behind the boulder, searching for an opening. When Kael'vor lunged again, Daniel rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding another devastating blow. This time, however, he noticed something, a brief hesitation in the general's movements before each strike. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it gave Daniel an idea. If he could anticipate the pattern, maybe he could turn the tide. Summoning every ounce of courage, Daniel stepped out into the open. Kael'vor smirked, clearly amused by the audacity. "You have spirit, human," he said, raising his blade once more. "But spirit alone will not save you." This time, instead of retreating, Daniel held his ground. He watched closely as Kael'vor shifted his weight, waiting for the telltale pause before the next attack. When it came, Daniel sidestepped with precision, swinging his baton upward in a counterstrike. The tip of the weapon connected with Kael'vor's wrist, causing the general to drop his blade momentarily. A murmur rippled through the spectators. No one had expected the young cadet to land even a single blow. Daniel didn't waste the opportunity. Pressing forward, he aimed another strike at Kael'vor's side, forcing the alien warrior to retreat. For the first time since the duel began, doubt flickered across Kael'vor's face. But the general recovered quickly. With a roar, he swung his arm wide, sending Daniel sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through Daniel's ribs as he hit the hard surface, knocking the wind out of him. Kael'vor loomed over him, blade poised to deliver the final blow. Yet instead of striking, the general hesitated, his glowing eyes narrowing as he studied Daniel. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Daniel lowered his baton, holding it loosely at his side. He looked up at Kael'vor, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. "I won't fight anymore," he said, his voice steady despite the pain coursing through his body. "If killing me is what you want, then do it. But I won't dishonor myself by continuing this." Silence fell over the canyon. Even the wind seemed to still as everyone processed what had just happened. Kael'vor stared down at Daniel, his expression unreadable. Finally, he lowered his blade, the hum of its energy fading into quiet. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving Daniel lying on the ground. Back aboard the ship later that day, Daniel sat in the medical bay while Emily tended to his injuries. The shallow cut on his shoulder had been cleaned and bandaged, and though his ribs were bruised, nothing appeared to be broken. Despite the physical toll, Daniel couldn't stop replaying the duel in his mind. He hadn't won, not in the traditional sense, but somehow he'd earned Kael'vor's respect. He didn't finish you, Laura said, entering the room. She leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. That's significant. Among the Zarnok, walking away from a fight is rare. It means he saw something in you worth acknowledging. But does it mean anything for the mission? Daniel asked, wincing as Emily applied pressure to his side. Did I make things better or worse? It's hard to say, Laura admitted, but tensions seem lower now. The Zarnok have requested a private meeting with our lead negotiator tomorrow. Maybe your actions opened a door we didn't think was possible. Daniel nodded, though uncertainty lingered. He knew the outcome of the duel wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. As Emily finished wrapping his ribs, she patted his shoulder gently. You did good, kid. Not many people would have had the guts to stand up to someone like Kael'vor. Her words brought a small smile to Daniel's face. For the first time since arriving on the planet, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he'd faced the hardest one yet, and survived. Later that evening, as the ship's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Daniel found himself staring out a viewport at the distant stars. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, each memory sharper than the last. He thought about Kael'vor's hesitation, the way the general had chosen to walk away rather than deliver the final blow. There was something in that moment, a shared understanding perhaps that Daniel couldn't quite put into words. As sleep finally claimed him, one thing became clear. This mission was far from over. But for the first time, Daniel felt ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the atmosphere aboard the ship was tense but hopeful. Word of Daniel's duel with Kael'vor had spread quickly among the crew, and while opinions varied, most agreed that something significant had shifted. The Zarnok delegation had requested a private meeting with humanity's lead negotiator, a development no one had anticipated. Laura spent hours preparing for the discussion, poring over notes and consulting with the diplomatic team. Daniel, meanwhile, was ordered to rest, though his mind refused to settle. As he lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, Daniel replayed every moment of the duel in his head. He kept returning to the way Kael'vor had hesitated before walking away. It wasn't just surprise or confusion. It was something deeper, almost like respect. But why? Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the general than met the eye. Perhaps beneath the imposing exterior and strict adherence to tradition, Kael'vor was someone who valued honor above all else. Later that day, Daniel was summoned to the briefing room. When he arrived, he found Laura and several other senior officers gathered around a table, their expressions serious. Sit down, Laura said, gesturing to an empty chair. We need to talk about what happened yesterday. Daniel obeyed, bracing himself for criticism or questions he might not be able to answer. Instead, Laura leaned forward, her tone measured but kind. Kael'vor has requested a personal meeting with you. The words hit Daniel like a punch, to the gut. With me? He asked, his voice rising slightly. Why would he want to see me? We don't know, Laura admitted, but it's unprecedented. The Zarnok rarely engage in direct communication outside formal channels, especially with someone of your rank. Whatever it is, it could be important. Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. Facing Kael'vor again, alone, was the last thing he wanted. Yet refusing wasn't an option. If this meeting could help salvage the mission, he had to go through with it. When does he want to meet? He asked, trying to sound calm. Tonight, Laura replied, at the same location as the duel, just you and him. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, Daniel made his way to the designated spot. His footsteps crunched softly against the gravel, each step echoing in the stillness. Kael'vor was already there, standing motionless with his back to Daniel. For a moment, Daniel considered turning around and leaving, but he forced himself to keep moving forward. I didn't expect you to come, Kael'vor said without turning. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking its usual booming authority. I didn't expect you to ask, Daniel replied, stopping a few paces away. He kept his hands at his sides, resisting the urge to fidget. "Why did you want to see me?" Kyle Vor finally turned to face him, his glowing eyes studying Daniel intently. "You intrigue me, human. Few would have the courage to stand against me as you did. Even fewer would choose to lower their weapon when victory seemed within reach." Daniel swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "I didn't do it to impress anyone. I couldn't keep fighting. Not after everything." Kyle Vor tilted his head slightly as if considering the statement. "Among my people, such actions are seen as weakness. Yet in you, they revealed strength. Why?" Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. "Maybe because strength isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop, about respecting yourself and others enough to walk away." For a long moment, Kyle Vor said nothing. Then unexpectedly he let out a low rumble that might have been laughter. "Your species is strange, Daniel Carter. You cling to ideals that seem foolish, yet they hold power. Power I underestimated." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the admission. "Does that mean you're calling off the duel or apologizing?" Kyle Vor straightened, his expression unreadable. "An apology is not something given lightly among my kind. But yes, I will offer one, for misjudging you and your people. Your actions have shown me that humans are capable of honor, even in the face of fear." Daniel stared at him, stunned. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined hearing those words from Kyle Vor. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." Kyle Vor nodded once, then turned to leave. Before disappearing into the darkness, he glanced back over his shoulder. "Do not mistake this for friendship, human. We are still different, but perhaps we can find common ground." Back aboard the ship, Daniel recounted the conversation to Laura and the rest of the team. At first they were skeptical, but the sincerity in Daniel's voice convinced them. "This could change everything," Laura said, pacing the room. "If Kyle Vor is willing to admit fault, it shows a level of trust we haven't seen before." Over. The next few days, negotiations resumed with renewed energy. The Zarnak delegation appeared more open to compromise, and tensions eased noticeably. Kyle Vor himself took a step back, allowing his subordinates to handle the details while he observed silently. Though he never spoke directly to Daniel again, the general's presence loomed large, a reminder of the fragile bond that had formed between their species. Daniel threw himself into the work, determined to prove that humanity deserved the respect Kyle Vor had reluctantly granted. He assisted Laura during strategy sessions, offered insights based on his interactions with the Zarnak, and even helped mediate disputes when misunderstandings arose. Slowly but surely, progress was made. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for dinner, Emily approached Daniel with a grin. "So, what's next for you, hero?" she teased, sliding onto the bench across from him. "Are you going to write a book about your adventures?" Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Not a chance, I'm just glad it's over." "Don't be so sure," Laura interjected, joining them with a tray of food. "The higher-ups are talking about promoting you. They think your actions set a new standard for diplomacy." Daniel's eyes widened. "Promotion? Me? I'm just a cadet." "You won't be for long if I have anything to say about it," Laura said firmly. "What you did out there, it wasn't just brave. It was smart. And it worked." As the conversation continued, Daniel allowed himself to relax for the first time in days. The weight of responsibility still lingered, but it felt lighter now, shared among friends who believed in him. He knew challenges lay ahead, both with the Zarnak and beyond, but for the first time he felt ready to face them. Later that night, as the ship drifted silently through space, Daniel stood by a viewport, gazing at the stars. The galaxy stretched, endlessly before him, vast and full of possibilities. Whatever came next, he realized he wouldn't face it alone. Humanity had taken its first steps toward understanding the Zarnak, and maybe, just maybe, that understanding could lead to something greater. As sleep finally claimed him, Daniel dreamed of distant worlds and new beginnings. The road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to take it, one step at a time. The days following the duel and Kael'vor's unexpected apology passed in a blur of activity. Negotiations between humanity and the Zarnok Empire progressed at a pace no one had anticipated. The atmosphere aboard the ship shifted noticeably, with tension giving way to cautious optimism. Daniel found himself at the center of it all, not because he sought attention, but because his actions had become a symbol of hope. His name was mentioned frequently in discussions, both formal and informal, as an example of how mutual respect could bridge even the widest gaps. Laura worked tirelessly alongside the diplomatic team, drafting agreements and addressing concerns raised by both sides. She often pulled Daniel into meetings, valuing his perspective on the Zarnok mindset after his encounter with Kael'vor. At first, Daniel hesitated to contribute, worried that his opinions might carry too much weight or lead to mistakes. But Laura insisted, reminding him that his unique experience made him invaluable. "You've seen them up close," she said during one briefing. "You know things we don't." Daniel took her words to heart, speaking up when necessary and offering suggestions based on what little he understood of Zarnok culture. He noticed patterns in their behavior, subtle gestures, changes in tone, that others seemed to miss. For instance, he pointed out that the Zarnok delegation appeared more receptive when addressed formally, even if the topic was minor. This observation led to adjustments in communication styles, smoothing over several sticking points in the talks. Meanwhile, Emily continued to check on Daniel regularly, ensuring his injuries healed properly. Though his bruises were fading and his cuts had scabbed over, she warned him not to push himself too hard. "You're tough, but you're not invincible," she said one evening, as she applied fresh bandages to his shoulder. "Don't let everyone forget that you're still human." "I'll try," Daniel replied with a grin, though he knew it was easier said than done. Every day brought new demands, from attending strategy sessions to fielding questions from curious crewmates. Despite the pressure, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced before. For the first time, he truly believed he was making a difference. As negotiations entered their final stages, excitement rippled through the ship. Rumors spread that a preliminary agreement was near, one that would pave the way for future cooperation between humans and the Zarnok. While details remained classified, snippets of information leaked out, fueling speculation among the crew. Some wondered if this marked the beginning of an alliance, while others feared it might be too good to last. Daniel shared their hopes and doubts, but he tried to stay grounded. He knew better than anyone how fragile the situation was. One misstep could undo everything they'd worked for. Still, he couldn't help feeling proud of what they'd accomplished so far. Even Kael'vor, who remained largely silent during the proceedings, seemed to approve, at least indirectly. Whenever Daniel caught sight of the general, there was a flicker of acknowledgement in his glowing eyes, as if silently thanking him for holding up his end of the bargain. One afternoon, Laura called Daniel into her office. She looked unusually serious as she gestured for him to sit. "We need to talk about the ceremony," she began without preamble. "What ceremony?" Daniel asked, confused. "The signing of the agreement," Laura explained. "It's going to be broadcast live across multiple channels, both human and Zarnok. They want you to attend." "Me?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Why me? I'm just a cadet. I shouldn't be anywhere near something like that." "You're not just anything anymore," Laura said firmly. "Your duel with Kael'vor changed the course of this mission. People recognize that, including the Zarnok. If you're not there, it sends the wrong message." Daniel slumped back in his chair, overwhelmed by the idea. Public appearances weren't his strong suit, especially not on such a grand scale. What if he said the wrong thing? Or worse, embarrassed everyone? "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "You can," Laura assured him. "And you will. We'll prepare you. Just focus on being yourself. That's what got us here in the first place." The day of the ceremony arrived sooner than Daniel expected. As he stood backstage, waiting for his cue to enter, he felt his pulse racing. The venue, a large chamber aboard the Zarnok flagship, was packed with delegates from both species. Cameras hovered overhead, capturing every moment for audiences light years away. Daniel tugged at the collar of his dress uniform, wishing he could disappear. When his name was announced, he stepped forward, forcing himself to walk steadily despite the tremor in his legs. Applause erupted from the human side of the room while the Zarnok responded with respectful silence, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Daniel scanned the crowd, spotting Laura and Emily seated near the front. Their encouraging smiles gave him a small boost of confidence. Kael'vor stood nearby, towering above everyone else. As Daniel approached the podium, the general inclined, his head slightly, a gesture Daniel interpreted as approval. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at him. "I never imagined I'd stand here today," he started, glancing at the assembled crowd. "A few weeks ago, I was just another cadet trying to prove myself. Then I met General Kael'vor and everything changed." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Our two species are different in many ways. We come from different worlds with different histories and traditions, but we also share something important, a desire to understand each other. That understanding doesn't come easily. It takes courage, patience, and sometimes even sacrifice. Today we take a step toward building something greater than ourselves, something that honors the best qualities of both our peoples." The room fell silent as Daniel finished, the weight of his words hanging in the air. For a moment he worried he'd said too much, or too little. Then applause broke out again, louder this time, joined by a low rumble from the Zarnok that sounded almost like cheers. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing he'd done it. He'd delivered his message, and it had resonated. After the ceremony, Daniel mingled with the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Many of the Zarnok delegates regarded him with curiosity, some even nodding in acknowledgement. Kael'vor lingered at the edge of the gathering, watching silently. When Daniel finally worked up the nerve to approach him, the general spoke first. "You did well," Kael'vor said simply, his deep voice carrying authority. "Your words carried truth." "Thank you," Daniel replied, unsure what else to. I meant every word." Kael'vor studied him for a moment longer, then extended a massive hand. It was a gesture Daniel recognized immediately, a sign of respect. Hesitantly, he reached out and shook it, marveling at the warmth radiating from the general's palm despite its rough texture. "This is only the beginning," Kael'vor added. "Do not forget what you have learned." "I won't," Daniel promised. Back aboard the human ship later that night, the crew celebrated the milestone with a feast. Tables groaned under the weight of food, laughter filled the air, and music played softly in the background. Daniel sat with Laura and Emily, enjoying the camaraderie but also reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "You've earned this," Laura said, raising her glass in a toast. "To Daniel, and to a brighter future." "To a brighter future," the others echoed, clinking their glasses together. As the celebration continued, Daniel excused himself and stepped outside onto the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, each one a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the possibilities it held. He thought about Kael'vor's parting words and realized the general was right. This was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But for now, Daniel allowed himself to savor the victory. The galaxy was full of unknowns, but standing there beneath the endless expanse of stars, Daniel felt ready to face them. Whatever came next, he knew he wouldn't be alone. Together, humanity and the Zarnok had taken their first steps toward peace, and Daniel intended to see that journey through to the end. The weeks that followed the signing of the agreement passed quickly, almost too quickly for Daniel to process. The ship prepared to leave the Zarnok system, its mission complete, or at least as complete as it could be for now. While the preliminary accord marked a significant step forward, everyone aboard understood that true cooperation would require time and effort from both sides. Humanity and the Zarnok had taken the first steps toward understanding each other, but the road ahead was long and uncertain. Daniel found himself reflecting on this often, especially during quiet moments when the hum of the ship's engines lulled him into thought. He spent hours staring out viewports, watching stars streak past as the vessel traveled through space. Each point of light represented a potential destination, a new world waiting to be explored. Yet the journey wasn't just about discovery, it was about connection. The events with Kael'vor had taught him that even the most unlikely bonds could form if people were willing to listen and learn. Onboard life returned to a semblance of normalcy, though things were different now. Daniel noticed subtle changes in how others treated him. Some crewmates sought him out for advice, asking questions about his experiences with the Zarnok. Others simply looked at him differently, their expressions carrying a mix of admiration and curiosity. At first, the attention made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being seen as anything other than an ordinary cadet. But over time, he grew more accustomed to it. Laura continued to mentor him, guiding him through the complexities of diplomacy and leadership. She encouraged him to document his thoughts and observations, suggesting that they might prove useful in future missions. "You've got a unique perspective," she told him one evening as they reviewed reports in the briefing room. "Don't let it go to waste." Daniel took her advice to heart, spending his free time jotting down notes about everything he'd learned. From the nuances of Zarnok body language to the importance of patience in negotiations, he tried to capture as much detail as possible. Writing helped him make sense of the whirlwind of emotions and experiences he'd been through, grounding him in the present while preparing him for whatever lay ahead. Emily, ever the supportive friend, checked in regularly to ensure Daniel wasn't overwhelmed. She teased him occasionally about becoming a celebrity, but always returned to genuine concern. "You've done amazing things," she said during one of their chats in the mess hall. "Just don't forget to take care of yourself." "Along the way, I won't," Daniel replied with a smile. "Thanks for looking out for me." As the ship approached Earth, excitement rippled through the crew. Many hadn't seen home in months or even years, and the prospect of reuniting with loved ones filled the corridors with chatter and laughter. For Daniel, however, the anticipation came with a tinge of apprehension. He knew his actions during the mission would draw attention, not just from his superiors, but from the public as well. News of the duel and Kael'vor's apology had already spread widely, sparking debates and discussions across the globe. When the ship finally docked, Daniel stepped onto solid ground for the first time in what felt like forever. The air smelled crisp and familiar, carrying hints of pine and damp soil. Around him, crowds gathered, families welcoming back their loved ones, reporters jockeying for position, officials eager to congratulate the returning crew. Daniel spotted Laura making her way toward a podium set up nearby, flanked by high-ranking officers. It was clear she intended to address the crowd, and Daniel braced himself for what was coming next. Sure enough, as Laura spoke, she mentioned Daniel by name, praising his courage and highlighting his role in securing the agreement. Cameras flashed, capturing his reaction as applause erupted from the audience. Daniel stood awkwardly, unsure where to look or what to do. When Laura gestured for him to join her on stage, he hesitated briefly before stepping forward. The spotlight burned brightly, but he reminded himself of what Laura had said. "Be yourself." Taking a deep breath, Daniel addressed the crowd. His voice wavered at first, but he steadied himself, speaking from the heart. "I didn't do this alone," he began, glancing at the crew standing behind him. "None of us did. This mission succeeded because we worked together, because we believed in the possibility of something better. And that belief is what will carry us forward." His words resonated deeply, drawing cheers and nods of approval. When he finished, the crowd erupted into sustained applause, leaving Daniel momentarily speechless. He stepped back, allowing Laura to continue the formalities, and retreated to the edge of the stage. There, he caught sight of Emily grinning broadly, giving him a thumbs up. Her support meant more to him than any accolade. In the days that followed, Daniel found himself thrust into the spotlight repeatedly. Interviews, ceremonies, and speeches became part of his routine, each event bringing new challenges and opportunities. Though exhausting, the experience taught him valuable lessons about resilience and adaptability. He learned to navigate media, scrutiny, handle difficult questions, and maintain composure under pressure, all skills he knew would serve him well in the future. Despite the whirlwind, Daniel never lost sight of why he'd joined the service in the first place: to make a difference. Every interaction, every conversation reinforced his belief in the power of understanding and cooperation. Whether addressing a room full of dignitaries or sharing stories with fellow cadets, he emphasized the importance of empathy and mutual respect. These values, he realized, transcended species and cultures, forming the foundation of true progress. One evening, as he sat alone in his quarters, Daniel received an unexpected message. It was from Kael'vor, or rather, a recording sent via diplomatic channels. The general's deep voice filled the room, calm and measured. "Cadet Carter, your actions have left a lasting impression on my people. You have shown that strength lies not in domination but in unity. Should our paths cross again, know that you will always have an ally in me." Daniel listened to the message several times, letting the words sink in. Though brief, it carried immense weight, a testament to the bond they'd forged despite their differences. He saved the recording, knowing it would remain a cherished reminder of how far he'd come. As weeks turned into months, Daniel settled into his new role within the organization. Promotions followed, recognizing his contributions and potential. Yet he remained humble, aware that leadership came with responsibility. He dedicated himself to mentoring younger cadets, sharing the lessons he'd learned and encouraging them to embrace challenges with open minds. Looking back, Daniel marveled at how much had changed since the day he'd stepped onto that alien planet. What had started as a routine mission had transformed into something far greater, a catalyst for change, not just for humanity, but for the Zarnak as well. He knew there would be obstacles ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but he also knew that the connections they'd built were strong enough to weather any storm. Standing once more beneath a sky filled with stars, Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, vast and full of possibilities. Whatever adventures awaited, he was ready to face them, not as a lone individual, but as part of a shared journey toward peace and understanding.